And then the 4'11" young guy with Down syndrome charges into the gym and everybody's cheering even louder. I think those kids will know that that kid with 4'11" kid is just like that All-American. And we got to build a country where we feel that way, where we see that way, where we hire that way, where we live that way. No inhibition. No performing for somebody else. No fear, just run like hell. And if you finish in last, you still put your arms up in the air. If you ran like hell, that's freedom, right? I saw in Special Olympics the chance to teach the world what the athletes knew, as opposed to offering the athletes what the world had to offer. The future can be better. We've made it better. It's better today than it was 10 years ago. It's a hell of a lot better today than it was 30 or 40 years ago. And we're gonna make it a hell of a lot better 10 years from now.
First of all, this is my voice. I'm Tim Green, and I have ALS. But this podcast isn't about ALS. I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I don't feel sorry for me. I'm a father of 5, married for over 35 years, a New York Times best-selling author, an NFL first-round pick, and a practicing attorney. This is Nothing Left Unsaid, where my son Troy and I sit down with extraordinary people for raw, honest conversations about life, its toughest trials, and greatest triumphs. My voice in today's episode is powered by 11 Labs. Our guest today isn't just a thinker. He's a builder of bridges in a time when most people are burning them. Tim Shriver has spent his life championing dignity, inclusion, and compassion, not from the sidelines, but right in the fight. From leading the Special Olympics to launching the Dignity Index, he's been showing us what real leadership looks like. This is a conversation about what holds us together and why it matters now more than ever.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tim Green. I'm honored to be with you.
Tim, you grew up where public service wasn't just encouraged, it was expected. What's one dinner table moment that still sticks with you, where you thought this is what it really means to be a Shriver or a Kennedy?
It's such a good question, and I've actually never been asked that before, Tim. Our dinner table growing up, even as a little kid, I can remember I must have been 5 or 6 years old, and my mother would turn to me, and if I had asked me my opinion on something in the news, and if I thought the person, whether it was a president or a judge or a senator, was doing the wrong thing, she'd say, okay, what would you do if you were the senator? What's your solution to the problem? So, and then, by the time you got your solution out of your mouth, one of your siblings would say, that's a lousy idea. So we just grew up in this very rough and tumble, ideas matter, opinions matter, young people's ideas matter world. But I'll tell you one thing that I remember. My mom was very committed to people with intellectual challenges. She was raised with her sister, my Aunt Rosemary, who had an intellectual challenge. And so we had a cleaning and healthcare, not healthcare. So we had a cleaning and help person in our house. And she decided to hire a person with an intellectual disability. This is in 1963 or 4 or 5. So Blanche became the person who would help us at dinner and help with cleaning and those kinds of things. And Blanche was very irreverent. And one night we had a fancy U.S. senator at our table, and the senator turned to Blanche and asked her for something, and she turned to him and said, just take your time, I only have 2 hands. and it was such a beautiful moment. And all my siblings remember this. Is like, first of all, what guts that she had to just put him in his place. And, how beautiful it was that in this room that was supposed to be all about power and, influence and politics, the person with an intellectual challenge actually spoke from the gut, from the heart, like actually spoke her truth. And it stuck with me as, Blanche had the guts to say what she was thinking and feeling. Everybody else was editing. I'm sorry to say I was editing, but she wasn't. And it was a good lesson for me to remember that sometimes not editing is really the way to a clear and honest, and in the end, transformative message that others can respect. Because when you tell your truth, I think people have a much better chance of understanding you and respecting what you're trying to convey.
With parents like yours, you could have easily stayed in their shadow. How did you figure out what your own calling sounded like?
Well, in some ways, my parents, my dad was involved in politics, was a founding director of the Peace Corps, created programs like Head Start and the Job Corps that are part of American life. My mom created the Special Olympics movement really just with the raw energy and grit and toughness of a single act, a single visionary. Part of my life, Tim, was trying to escape that shadow. And another part of my life is trying to recognize how lucky I am to be in it. I knew pretty early on, I sat in the back of a lot of political rallies, I'd say thousands. And, my dad would be up on the stage, or an uncle would be on the stage, or my mom would be on the stage at different times. I'd be in the back sitting there and overhearing what everybody was saying. And a lot of times kids hear horrible things in politics. That jerk, the people talk horribly about political. We just use language that's just horrible. And children, I'm 7 years old. I'm hearing this about my dad or about my uncle. It's kind of painful. But what I realized was that the people that were talking in the back of the room had stories to tell, and they didn't always see politics as capturing their story. Kids, young people, working people, labor union folks. They were often be dismissive of the politics. So something about me said, I want to get closer to people to understand the more human dimensions of their problems. So I became a teacher. Because I thought to myself, well, there you really get to meet people. And, there you really get to understand. If you're 14 years old, it's one thing for a politician to start a program to help you. It's another thing for a human being to look you in the eyes and see you. I wanted to be the guy who looked him in the eyes and saw them. So I traded, the world of policy and politics for the world of education and child development and human connection. And, it's a trade-off. But I was really, I've loved my work. Honestly, I feel like I've had the best. I know you think you probably had the best career ever, but you and I are going to compete because I feel like I've had the best career ever. No first round draft picks, no 40 books, no good looking kid. Well, I have good looking kids, maybe not as good looking as Troy, but pretty good looking kids.
If you think I'm the good looking one, then there's more. There's 4 more that are a lot better.
Yeah. Well, I got good ones too. Anyway, we could go toe to toe. But anyway, the point is, I guess I've loved the chance to learn about human development, the chance to meet people who are angry at the world, people who are heartbroken by the world, people who are enthusiastic. And a lot of these people are 12, 14 years old. Some of them have intellectual disabilities. Some of them are just 14-year-olds trying to make it. Some of them are their moms and their dads, but they've been gracious enough to tell me real stories about their lives and invite me in to try to be part of solutions to the problems they're facing. And it's been fantastic.
I got 2 questions for you. The first is, you kind of grew up in a household, I would say similar, obviously not the same, but similar to ours, and where when we were really young, our opinions mattered. And my dad, who was a very imposing figure in every way, maybe 5 times in my life, he would be like, "Oh, am I wrong on this?" And 99% of the time, it was, he would be right. But there were a couple of times where me and my siblings, he'd be we would explain what the situation was from our point of view or whatever, and he'd say, "You know what? I'm wrong. I made a mistake. I didn't realize that." And that's something that I didn't know that was unique until, I talked to friends and stuff, or they would see it. I'd have friends over and they'd see that and be like, "Whoa, your dad just said he was wrong." I'm like, "Yeah, that's so big." So the reason I bring that up is in an environment where you're taught young that your opinion matters, and you're not afraid to say things that might be controversial at the dinner table because you're in that kind of safe learning environment. Did you ever get into it with anybody at a political rally when they were in the back kind of being negative? Did you ever make any comments?
Yes, I did. Politics is, in a way, like sports. There's only winning and losing. When the election's over, you didn't, you're not close, right? You either won or you lost. So I remember like when I was in 8th grade, my dad was a candidate for vice president of the United States. And it was a small 8th grade classroom, and there were a lot of people who were in favor. In those days, the campaign was against Richard Nixon. And there were a lot of Nixon people in my class. And I would bring in like hundreds of bumper stickers and try to, and then they'd go down to the Nixon headquarters and try to, because I had access to thousands of bumper stickers. So I had a competitive advantage in making my case. But I would challenge them on issues early on issues like the Vietnam War, on civil rights, on poverty. How can we address poverty in this country? And learned a little bit of righteous indignation that sometimes serves you well, sometimes makes it hard for you to understand and listen to other people. But I learned a lot of that. And I was on the debate club in high school and, ready to go at it. I would not say that I learned a lot about how to say I might be wrong. I actually learned that from a teacher. I was actually a basketball coach who turned teacher. A legendary basketball coach in New Haven named Salvatore Verderame, who led high school championship teams from the small city of New Haven to New England championships and more. And I remember the first year he became the principal of the school, I was in the principal's office after school one day, and the superintendent called and was giving it to him, reaming him for issues around the school. And I just happened to be in the office, and I could see him nodding his head and so forth. And he hung up the phone. I said, what did he say? He said, we got to do better on the, he said, it's an outrage the way the discipline is in the school, and there's the grounds of the school are dirty. He really gave it to me. I said, well, why didn't you fight back? And he said, because he's right. And I was like, because he's right? Yeah, and I was ready to, I got my but we didn't have the resources, we cleaned it yesterday and, we can't keep up. And he was like, no, he's right. It's outrageous. It's ridiculous. And he brought in the administrative team and he says, we got to do better. So that was like, I don't know whether that's something learned in sports or learned with some degree of humility, but learning how to look at things squarely and honestly and listen well and be able to say, I'm fighting for what I believe in, but I'm open to hearing that I might be wrong. That's the real gift your dad gave you. And I think it's, I'm grateful that Red taught me, but I think a lot of us need to practice that skill more. Let's put it that way.
And then the other question I had is you said that you became a teacher to kind of get closer to people. And I, again, similar but different. I grew up in a shadow. And the part that totally the best way I've ever heard anyone describe it, what you said, where you want to escape the shadow and make your own shadow, but you also want to stay in the shadow because it's so lucky and you're so fortunate to have it. And my thought is, when you kind of grew up, obviously in that shadow, in that environment, and you learned things and made opinions, when you became a teacher, it gives you a whole different perspective, hearing right from the source and people that you mentioned or grew up different in very different situations. Was there any, I'm sure there's 100, but is there one story in particular that either a student or a parent or somebody that you talked with kind of changed your perception on, I don't know, the how you viewed the world from how you grew up to hearing?
Well, I think the big lesson I learned as when you train as a teacher, you get trained in curriculum, right? So I'm going to teach writing, let's say. And here's how you scaffold the writing exercises and grammar and punctuation and sentences and then paragraphs and then narrative and then characters, all that stuff. Or you're teaching math, the same thing, or social studies. I taught U.S. history. How do you go from, through a linear sequence of events and make sure kids can understand them and get the lessons from them? What you don't get trained in as a teacher is how to listen. And I think it's a profound mistake. And I think actually the superpower of your time, Troy's, it wasn't really of mine, but I think of your time, that the new superpower is the capacity to listen. And kids taught me that. High school kids taught me that. When I was standing in front of, 20 or 30 high school kids in New Haven, Connecticut, and I saw their heads down on the desk, and I'd ask for homework, and, 3 hands would hand it in, and the others would just look at me blankly. And I'd berate them and I'd castigate them and I'd tell them why it was important to work and hard work is important. I have all the lessons lined up in my head. And if you don't do this, this is what's going to happen. And then one kid said to me, well, it ends up being an adage, but she said to me, Mr. Shriver, around here, nobody cares how much you know until we know how much you care. And it just sounds like a saying, but the kids, there was an unwritten language in that community. All your knowledge doesn't mean squat here unless we know it's coming from an authentic place of compassion and caring, because otherwise it's useless to us. Because a lot of those kids didn't trust language. They didn't trust knowledge. They didn't trust the information. They'd seen their moms and dads try to learn, and it didn't get them anywhere. They'd seen the system and the culture treat their parents and the adults in their families like crap. And so, a bunch of information about the periodic table or about the Civil War, about the punctuation of a paragraph, you can take that wherever you want. It's never, for many of my students, it hadn't proven to be valuable. But someone who cared about them, someone who actually was in it for and with them, that was valuable. And then they would learn, because then there was a sense that the information had meaning. So I learned a lot in my first 5 years. I was not a good teacher. I'll just be honest. I tried hard. I worked as hard as any teacher in the school district, I dare say, but I wasn't that good until I started to flip the switch and realize that the kids needed to understand who I was, not what I knew, what I cared about, not what information I brought to them. Then, once I started to connect with kids, then things started to happen in a different way.
That's a powerful message that I hope all teachers can apply. Tim, you spent years in New Haven before anyone handed you a microphone. What did those students teach you that no Harvard degree ever could?
Yeah, they taught me to see the dignity in everybody. Kids in New Haven, schools are stratified. You have the kids in the advanced classes, you got the kids in the academic class, you have the kids in the general classes, you have the kids in the remedial classes. Before you know it, if you're not careful, you're starting to see some kids matter and some kids don't. And you've got kids who are playing varsity football or varsity basketball, and the gym is full of fans. And you've got kids who have Down syndrome. And if you're not careful, you can start to think some kids matter and some kids don't when it comes to sports, when it comes to academics. My students taught me that everybody has a gift, and that my job as a teacher was to help to make sure I saw it and to help make sure that my kids, my students, saw their own gift. Like, to convince them what was a little bit countercultural, which is that they were beautiful human beings, no matter what. That the hard work would come when they believed in themselves and they believed in the power and the value that the work would bring them. But telling them to work hard when they didn't believe was valueless. It really was empty words. So I really learned a lot, Tim, about how to see from the inside out. This is what really helped me in Special Olympics, how to recognize that relationships matter in some ways much more than information. There's that old saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. I don't think that's true. But those kids taught me that how you know matters. And that wasn't something I learned in an Ivy League classroom or in any classroom. I learned it on street corners. I learned it doing home visits, walking up to the 6th and 7th floor of a walk-up housing project and trying to, tutor kids. And seeing the sparkling eyes of, a young 16-year-old so excited to see me because I had taken the time to, do what many, many good teachers did, but not all. So they taught me I'll give you one other example. I was asked by one of the teachers there to start a group, after-school group, for young men who were parents. We had a lot of young women who were moms, and so we obviously had a lot of young men who were dads in this high school. But there was programs for the moms, nothing for the dads. So this teacher said to me, look, you seem to have a knack for this stuff. Why don't you get the dads together? I'll give you the names of the dads and see if you can get them together and start working with them. Make them proud to be dads, make them strong men. So I put on a PA announcement to the following kids, we're going to have a support group. And one kid showed up. And his name was Doug. And I said, well, I wanted to start this group. I was asked to start this group. I think it'll be great. There's about 20 guys on the list. I want to call it the support group. I don't know whether we should call it support group for dad. He said, don't call it a support group, man. No one's going to come to that. He said, call it a leadership group. I was like, leadership group? Okay, let's try that. Let's go. So we announced the leadership group, and all these guys came. And then the teacher started saying to me, why would you call that a leadership group? Those kids aren't leaders. I was like, oh, yes, they are. Oh, yes, they are. You might not have seen it yet. Oh, but yes, they are. Oh, yes, they are. And those kids, not all of them were good students at the time, but they were the ones that organized the first big service project for the school to go out and paint houses of indigent families. They organized the first dance. Nobody wanted to have a dance because everybody was afraid. The kids organized the dance. The kids organized pizza parties. The kids organized support for each other when they were struggling in their academics. Why? Because someone said to them, and it really was their peer, it wasn't me. I was the adult, but it was peer to peer. You guys are leaders. What are you doing messing around getting C's and D's? You're a leader. You should be getting A's and B's. And the kids were like, you're damn right I am. I'm bringing my grades up because somebody said, you got it in you. That's what they taught me. I mean, Tim, just by the way, not everybody has it as easy as you. Not everybody is 6'3" and 250 and runs the 40 in like 2.5 seconds. Like most of us have to struggle along to find our strength, so you have to have some sympathy for us.
When you stepped into your mom's role in 1996, what was going through your head that first day? Was there a voice in the back of your mind whispering, don't screw this up?
That was pretty much the mandate. Don't screw this up. Special Olympics, I resisted going there. I was very happy in my work in the New Haven public schools, but for a whole host of reasons, the particular jobs and roles I played were done. And the Special Olympics opportunity came along, and I'd been a volunteer my whole life, and I'd worked on the World Games, and I'd been on the board locally, and I'd played on unified teams and things like that. So my wife, Linda, and I, we discussed it. I said, well, we'll move to Washington for a couple of years. And it'll be great. It'll be a great learning experience, and we can contribute to the Special Olympics movement. And that was the message. It was like, this is a great movement. All you have to do is not screw it up. Like, above all, don't screw it up. Like, I think the Hippocratic Oath is something like that, right? Don't do any harm. But it quickly, became something quite different. I saw, maybe because of my background, I saw in Special Olympics the chance to teach the world what the athletes knew, as opposed to offering the athletes what the world had to offer. I never forget Loretta Claiborne. She's a Special Olympics athlete. I brought her to a big function for wealthy alumni, Ivy League alumni, and to give a speech. And she was she was probably 45 years old at the time, or 40 years old, a marathon runner, a woman who'd grown up in the housing projects of York, Pennsylvania, the youngest or almost the youngest of 7 or 8, came from nothing, but turned out to be, because of hard work, a great marathoner. She finished in the top 100 in Boston Marathon, stuff like that. So I said, Loretta, you're going to go speak to all these wealthy people. And we got to convince them that, to respect our athletes, let our athletes, be included and stuff like that. And she gets up and she's giving her talk. And at the end, she says, people say that it's important to let people with intellectual disabilities into the world. And she said, I understand, but I want to invite you into my world. Because in my world, things are much better. In my world, we treat everybody right. In my world, we learn each other's language. In my world, everybody gets a chance. In my world, if you do your best, you get rewarded. And I was like, whoa, no, that's, and then I was like, how did I miss it? What I ended up wanting to do with the Special Olympics movement is allow the world to get out of the pity mindset and the sympathy for people who have intellectual. I'm so sorry you have Down. I'm so sorry you have autism. No, 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 no. The message, I heard it from Loretta. The message of our movement is we got the big things right. You need to come to our world if you want to know what matters most. You know, if you want to know how to be free, like we talk about freedom in the United States, you want to know how to be free, go to Special Olympics. Watch people let it all out. No inhibition. No performing for somebody else. No fear. You know, just run like hell. And if you finish in last, you still put your arms up in the air. If you ran like hell, that's freedom, right? And so that's what I ended up assuming as a role. I thought my role could be, because I'm so interested in teaching lessons, my role could be to flip the script a little bit from the world helping people with intellectual disabilities to people with intellectual challenges teaching the world how to live. Even NFL players, by the way.
How did people react when she gave that speech? Did you get a lot of feedback from people?
No, I think, honestly, most of the people in the room were kind of like, they didn't get it. I think most of them were like, are you asking me for a check? Are you asking me for my company to become a sponsor? Are you asking me for an award? That it was really hard for people, and it still is honestly hard for people to see someone, let's say with autism, who's struggling and working really hard to run that 100-meter dash and stay in the lane, stride with your arms, get to the finish line, not give up, have your wind and your strength ready for that. To see that person and not see the limitation, to see the grit and how hard they had to work, and how many hours they had to prepare, and how many hurdles they had to clear to learn how to stay in the lane, and how much confidence they needed to be able to try, even if their success wasn't guaranteed. And all of a sudden, you're not seeing the disability, you're seeing this extraordinarily powerful human being. We still work in our movement to help people see the full story of what's in front of them, not just the limitation story. Does that make sense? When you hear it?
Yeah, no, I think it's perfect because that them not getting it is exactly her point.
Exactly, that's right.
And I would say to you that there's a 0% chance I would have got it until like even when my dad was diagnosed with ALS, wouldn't have got it. Even when his speech started to slur, wouldn't have got it until like he was in a wheelchair. Mm-hmm. And it's still because he still does everything he does. He still works full time. And it's not obviously an intellectual impairment; it's a physical impairment. But I say to people like, somebody like, oh, I don't hear from your dad as much. I'm like, him reaching out to you once is like me calling you 100 times.
Right.
So, and I'm not calling a lot of people 100 times. So
right.
It's like but it's like the words. And Dad, I'm talking like you're not here again, but the words mean more when he says it. Because if he took the time to type that to you, it took a heck of a lot more effort. Like for me, I like to talk, and I talk fast, just like words just kind of fall out of my mouth. I don't know what I'm saying half the time. But for him, it was intentional, it was thoughtful, it was crafted out, and then the effort. Me blabbing this sentence takes zero effort. It's just flowing out. But for him to craft it, and I'm sure you've seen it in how he uses the eye tracker now, it's finicky, it has problems, it gives issues. Sometimes the technology, sometimes he does everything right and the technology just doesn't work. Sometimes, so anyways, I think now I get it, but I don't know how somebody could get that without seeing it. I don't know if it has to be your dad or it has to be you, but I think you have to be up close and personal to it.
I think you're right. You have to be up close and personal, which is why Special Olympics is always about inviting people to get up close and personal with our athletes. And I want to acknowledge how honored I am that Tim, that you invited me, to be part of this conversation in which you have to put so much energy into. There's 1,000 people you could have on here. And I'm really, the more I was thinking about this conversation, the more I was reading about you, and I was like, holy shit, how did I get the honor? I'm serious. I get it. I mean, it's really it's moving not to the point of pity, but to the point of awe. And nobody asks for, really painful diseases. I mean, I'm not suggesting anything's good about getting ALS or having other challenges in life. These things are really tough. They're really, life is full of things that are really hard. And things that are really hard reveal something really beautiful about the human spirit, in my view. Or you're wearing that big cross around your neck, which I love. Whether if it was another religion, it's to kind of say, like, there's something bigger here. And sometimes it takes pain. I'm sorry to say, sometimes it takes pain and adversity to reveal the bigger story that's going on right in front of our eyes. And that's what I think Loretta was trying to say. There's another story going on here, you guys. And the story isn't that you're such hot shit and that, all your bank statements and degrees produce happiness or meaning or purpose. Actually, I know more about that than you do. That's what she was saying. And that takes a little bit of up close and personal to get it, even though she struggled so much, unjustly, by the way, unjustly had to struggle so much in her life. She'd learned something that for many of those people, I hesitate to say it that way, but for many of those people, it's hard to learn.
Loretta sounds like a real gem. Tim, your inclusion revolution is a big idea, but what does that look like in real life, say, for an athlete walking into a gym on a Tuesday afternoon?
What it means to the athlete walking into the gym on a Tuesday afternoon is that when they walk into the gym, there's no judgment. There's no judgment. If you walk into the gym and you've got autism and you have to run around the gym even in the middle of the game, everybody's going to go, that's Timmy. That's what he does. No one's going to look at you or your mom or your brother and go, what's wrong with him? Nobody ever says, what's wrong with that guy? What's wrong with that girl? That's what it means. It means when you walk in, you're seen as you are. And as you are is the place we are all ready to start. And you will be asked to do things that are bigger and stronger and more difficult than you could have imagined. You'll be asked to train. You'll be asked to practice. You'll be asked to learn skills. But you will not be asked to apologize for who you are. And nobody will ever do that in a Special Olympics venue. And as a result of that single shift, people often describe walking into a gym on a Tuesday afternoon with basketballs bouncing around, just like a million people in America experience probably every year or whatever. But when you walk into a Special Olympics gym, it almost feels like you're switching time zones or humanity zones. It's almost like you're going into an alternate reality. And people's shoulders drop down and their face muscles relax. And you see moms and dads put their big, heavy bags down and sitting on the side. And you can just see they're not running around worried. They're not looking over their shoulder. They're just like, oh my God, my kid's okay here. And people walk in and they say, I'm okay here. I think it makes it's what religion at its best, I think, brings to human beings, this sense in which you are in the presence of something, some force. Different religions use different words, that loves you and will always love you and loved you into creation and will love you beyond this creation into the next. That's what religion ought to be teaching, I think, personally. And at its best, it does teach. But I gotta say, my wife said to me, some people would say I'm excessively religious, but my wife isn't. She's not. And I remember her saying, all 5 of our kids played Special Olympics unified sport. And we were there like, I don't know, like the fifth kid was maybe a sophomore or something like that, playing basketball on a January Saturday morning. And she turned to me and she said, I know you've wanted the kids to go to church and all that stuff, but the kids have learned a lot more about God in this gym than they have in church.
That's powerful. My dad, does that sound familiar? Not the Special Olympics part. Everything else you described sounds very familiar.
Yeah. By the way, I don't agree with her. Just to say, I think they've learned a lot about God in church, but I think they have learned a lot about God at Special Olympics too.
Yeah, I think, and this is totally uneducated opinion, but I think you can learn more about, not more or less. I think you can learn as much. I think you can have profound experiences outside of religion that you don't realize it's a religious experience.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Very few, if you read biblical or sacred texts, very few of the religious experiences described in those texts took place in a religious setting. I mean, Moses has his epiphany, out in the middle of nowhere with his shoes off in front of a bush. Jesus goes up on a mountain or on the ocean. He doesn't say he worked a lot of miracles, after ritual cleansing. So, that doesn't demean religious institutions. Quite the contrary. It strengthens, I think, the importance of what they can teach us. But if God were only in a church, it would be a pretty rotten planet. Why would God have created the planet the way God did if he wanted to hole up in like 30, 40 buildings?
The Special Olympics became a health movement under your leadership. Was there one athlete or moment that made you say, we've got to do more than sports?
Yes. In 1995, we had Special Olympics World Games, and people confuse us with other organizations, but Special Olympics runs like in an average year, like last year, about 60,000 games a year. They're all local. But we do big ones too, like the big guys, right? We have a big World Games, and there's 100 and plus countries or 150 countries, depending on the event, and thousands of people and stadium shows and all that. So at this particular World Games, we had a group of dentists who volunteered, and they said, could we set up a tent next to the track, next to the venues, and invite athletes to come in and be screened, because we're seeing a lot of athletes who don't get to see the dentist. And we'd like to offer them free screenings and instruction on how to floss and brush and stuff like that. Well, fast forward, they screened several thousand athletes who came through. And at the end, about 10 days afterwards, I said, could we present to you the data? And they said, I said, sure. Well, what did you find? And they said 19% of the athletes we screened, almost 1 in 5, we had to make referrals to the emergency room. I said, what do you mean, refer? They said the disease in the mouth was so significant and the pain so severe that we couldn't recommend that they go see a dentist later. They had to go see someone immediately. They had to get it. And I said, 1 in 5 people who were marched into the opening ceremonies, and 1 in 5 who were on the track or in the pool or playing soccer or volleyball or flag football, 1 in 5 had such severe disease or pain that we had to send them to the hospital? They said, absolutely. I said, what the hell's going on? They said, one doctor said to me, he said, look, a lot of doctors just don't want to care for these people. The reimbursement rates are lousy. Medicaid is a problem. A lot of states don't provide dental support. Same thing came through from the optometrists who were doing screenings. Thousands of athletes didn't have the right glasses. They're running on the track and they can't see. I said, why is that? Oh, this one doctor said to me, well, most optometrists, they look at the athlete and say, well, we got to get that guy in and out of here. Just get him in, get him out quickly. We don't want him in the waiting room. And anyway, they're not driving a car. They're not reading books. They're not going to complain. Just give them some pair of glasses and get them out. So all these athletes had the wrong glasses. Thousands. And they had disease all in their mouth, untreated, undiagnosed. And when I saw that, Tim, I said to myself, you cannot be your best athlete if you're not a healthy athlete. And I said, let's start inviting the medical field to come to our venues and do these screenings so we can train them, so we can awaken them, so we can challenge these stereotypes and these stigmas, so we can change the systems that care for them.
Is there an update from 95 to today? Are those numbers hopefully a lot less?
They're better. It depends a lot. We're doing this now all over the world. We're doing healthy athletes and healthy communities, and we're doing research all over the world now. So it depends a lot on the country. It depends a lot on the income. If you're a person who has an intellectual disability who's wealthy, as you might imagine, your outcomes are much, much better. The outcomes for average middle or lower middle income people in healthcare systems are better than they were 20 years ago, but they're not where they're supposed to be. And the systems still punish caregivers who provide care for these people. And they're, we do surveys of medical schools. Most doctors, I'm talking pediatricians, cardiologists, dermatologists, most of them say, majorities across all these say they don't have enough training to care for a person with an intellectual disability. So they routinely say, no, I can't take you as a patient. And you hear this from parents all the time. I have to go 30 miles to see a dentist. I have to go, my pediatrician is in the city where we used to live, so we travel. We have to go overnight, and we spend the night at the pediatrician for my son to see the doctor, because there's no pediatrician where I live, or there's no cardiologist who knows anything about Down syndrome or Williams syndrome here. So we try. So it's still a problem, and we're trying our best to elevate it, but we've got a lot of work to do.
Those numbers are terrible. I'm glad you're fighting against it. Tim, you've produced powerful films. What makes you stop and say, this story might actually change somebody's heart?
Usually they hit me over the head. And I've been blessed because I work in an area where very few people who are kind of Hollywood types work. So I just get the privilege of seeing human beings. Almost everything I've worked on has been a film based on a real life story. I mean, I've worked on one or two fictional things, but mostly it's real life stories. And it's just like the Loretta Claiborne story that Disney made. I mentioned Loretta Claiborne earlier here, a young woman, a marathoner, wins the Arthur Ashe Award for Courage from Denzel Washington at Radio City Music Hall before millions of television viewers. And I'm with her afterwards, like, what was it like, Loretta? What did you think? Well, what was it like being with Denzel on the stage and everything? And she said, who's Denzel? I was like, Denzel Washington. She said, is that the guy that gave me the award on the stage? I was like, yeah. He seems like a nice guy, And here I am like, what's it like to be with a celebrity, And she's just like another human being. So anyway, Tim, I get to see these human beings. Like, you just can't meet Loretta and not go, holy moly, what a woman. Like, why hasn't her story been told? And that's all that happens. That's what happens to me. I'm like, wow. Look at this guy. Why hasn't that story been told? So, I mean, I have the benefit of having access to people who know people in the entertainment spaces. And a lot of times I'll just write up a few paragraphs and say, you guys, you got to make this movie because this is going to be a hit. I mean, this thing is a story waiting to be told. But I don't have the rights to any of your books, so I can't make any of them into movies yet.
We'll discuss that after the podcast.
Tough negotiation to come.
Yeah.
You've been loud and clear on the R word for folks who still throw it around like it's harmless. What would you say to snap them out of it?
I say to people, you're free to use whatever word you want to use. And I'm free to ask you to stop. And the only reason I'm asking you to stop is because it hurts people. That's it. Painful. And most people don't want to cause other people pain. It's not like something people wake up saying, how can I find innocent people who don't deserve anything but the best? How can I find a way to really cause them pain? I don't think most people wake up that way. So most people will stop. We're not a call-out movement. We're not trying to catch people. We're not trying to embarrass them or get them fired or, post on social media that they're jerks. We do post on social media, but it's always an invitation. just an invitation to meet. Come meet the people who which you're using language to humiliate, and hear the story of how hard they have to work and how difficult it is when they feel like they get heartbroken because of the way the world treats them. And for most people, that's enough. Not everybody. But we ask people not to use the R word, not because we're politically correct. I could care less about politically correct. I don't care about what party you're in, left or right or center. I don't care whether you go to church or you don't go to church, whether you're, Muslim or Jewish or Christian or Hindu or Buddhist. I don't care whether you're tall or short. I don't care whether you played in the NFL or you can't make the flag football team at school. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. All that matters is that we're trying to show people that, to speak from the heart. Don't hurt people if you can avoid it. And every time someone prominent uses that word, my inbox fills up with athletes, telling me that they're hurt, telling me they didn't go to work today, telling me how embarrassing it is, sending me videos, bursting into tears. I'm like, you can use it, but please don't. Please choose a different word. Just please choose a different word. No other slur is used commonly. Slurs against people of different religions were common years and years ago. Most people don't use them now against people of different races. Most people don't use them now. The vast majority wouldn't be caught dead using some of those words. But they still feel like it's okay to humiliate people with intellectual disabilities. I just tell them, please, don't do that. Pick on somebody else. Pick on an elephant. Pick on an animal. Like my mother used to say, we don't use that language here. You want to call somebody a name, call them elephant ears. I never knew where she came up with that. But that was her way of saying, just pick on somebody else. Don't pick on a person with an intellectual disability. Please. I always say please. It's not a threat, it's an invitation.
This is a great segue into a question I had about the dignity index you helped co-create. Social media is full of noise about unity, but the dignity index tries to measure it. How does scoring language actually help us listen again?
It's a great question. So, we've talked a lot about dignity in the Special Olympics movement, and many other people do too. And when we were talking about social media, the biggest voices on social media are celebrities and influencers and politicians and all these kinds of people, partisan news. So we looked at them and we started talking to some of them saying, why don't you change your language? They said, well, it doesn't pay. It pays to be snarky. It pays to be cruel. It pays to humiliate other people. We get more clicks. We get more, and nobody ever rewards us if we use dignity. Nobody measures us. The Emanuel Cleaver, a congressman, I get measured for everything I do. I never get measured for whether I treat someone with dignity. So I have to conclude it doesn't matter. So we said, okay, game on. We're going to measure. We're going to actually set up a measure that can objectively, not in a partisan way. I don't score Tim Green because he's a liberal and I'm a liberal, or he's a conservative and I'm a liberal, whatever. I just score Tim Green objectively. When you say about someone else that you're the bad people and you're trying to do bad things to the country, I can score that. That's a 4. Maybe even a 3 on the dignity index. It's not because I'm right or wrong. I just got a 3 on the dignity index. That's it. So the dignity index scores from 1 at the bottom, which is you're not human, you don't even deserve to live. And sadly, we hear language like that on social media and even from political leaders, all the way up to 8. As you move up, you're using less contempt. A 4 is just, we're better than them. A 5 is everybody gets equal time. A 7 is where you started, which is I have a strong opinion, but I'm open to believing I might be wrong. That's a 7. An 8 is no matter what, I'm going to treat you with dignity no matter what. And people say, well, you can't do that. No one does an 8. Actually, we get 8s all the time in life. If I say to someone, particularly people on the left, do you think someone for life in prison should be treated with dignity? Oh, yes. Because you agree with what they did? No. They should still be treated with dignity. And if I say the same questions to people on the right about other things. So we can agree when you see the language on the scale, it helps you see not just where people land on this one issue. It's just a measure of how you treat someone else when you disagree. That's all. That's the only thing it's a measure of. If Troy and I disagree and I make my case, how am I treating him when I disagree? And that question we can score. And when we score it, it has the effect, it's actually quite surprising. It has the effect of exposing the contempt of the other, but it also has the effect of letting me see my own. As this one woman said to me, I don't know what you want me to do. I hate hateful people. And what she was saying was she'd become what she hates. She'd become a hateful person to oppose hateful people. Fannie Lou Hamer said this in the 1960s. If you hate me and I hate you back, I've become just the same as you. She said it better than that. So we're trying to help people see themselves, see contempt in themselves, which we usually don't see, most of us don't usually see, but also see ways to grow and improve. And what we find is almost immediately people want to get better. Like to say, oh yeah, well, I did talk about, President Biden or President Trump, or I did talk about him last night, and I did actually score too. I was just talking to my friends or my brother or my husband or whatever, but I was talking using two languages. I guess I could have said it, and then they fill in the blank to speak at the level of a 5 or a 6. And before you know it, you're not sacrificing your principles. You're just changing the way you treat someone when you disagree. And that turns out to be quite effective.
Your podcast called Need a Lift digs into what keeps people steady. What's one daily practice that keeps you grounded, especially when life feels like chaos?
That's a question I ask everybody on Need a Lift. I always start by asking them, what's your practice? And some people say, I don't have one. And then some people say, well, I don't know if it's a practice, but here's what I do. For me, Tim, I started a long time ago being a student of what in my tradition we call centering prayer. And it's a close cousin of meditation or contemplative practice or silence. It's a version of all those things. They're all kind of a little bit similar. In centering prayer, we're encouraged to sit in silence for 20 minutes twice a day. So morning and evening, or morning and afternoon, depending on your day. And I've been really lousy at keeping to that schedule over the course of my life, but I stick to it enough that it, I think, has helped me return to my center and develop the capacity in moments of difficulty and chaos and sadness, grief, anger, injustice. We all have these moments, but what I think centering prayer has helped me do is make sure that to the best of my ability, I'm acting in those moments from my source, from the energy of my soul. I think it's so that's been my practice. You'd have to ask my kids or my wife or my sister or my brothers whether I'm any good at it. But I think when you can bring your grief or your anger to your soul level, it makes it possible for your soul level to bring the best out of you. And that's what the practice of just silence. All you do is just start a timer and sit there for 20 minutes. So it's not complicated, that's for sure. It's hard to do it, but it's not complicated. It's a pretty simple practice.
That's great. The simple things can sometimes be the most challenging. Tim, you've written about moments that made you feel fully alive. Can you share one from this year that reminded you that you were in the right line of work?
We were at, I was at a high school in Utah about 2 weeks ago. And I was speaking to the whole high school, like 500 kids were in the theater. And I was talking about dignity, and I put up a slide that shows how words that are used on social media, You're disgusting. You're embarrassing. You're a fool. A slide that just showed a lot of these images of social media attacks. And a lot of the kids in the theater started laughing. It was like they were giggling when they saw all these really vicious insults, and they were just flashing up fast, right? So at the end, I said, "By the way, yeah, I saw you guys all laugh. A lot of you laughed." Right? And one hand goes up, yeah, because it's funny. And another hand goes up, and that's the way you get popular. And then Ellie Jacobs stood up off to the left side of the theater, about halfway in the middle of a row, and said, I didn't like seeing that because I've been called all those names all through school. And I've been bullied, and people always say those words to me. And then she got emotional. She started to cry in front of 300 high school kids. And you could have heard a pin drop. And another student from across the theater got up out of his seat and came over and said, "Can I give you a hug?" This is in front of the whole school. And I just realized that when Ellie stood up there and risked everything to tell her truth, that cruelty, mockery, sneer, snark, destroy lives, in her case, her own. And when that other young man got up to say, "I'm going to be in this with you," even though you took that big chance, even though you're running that risk, I knew right there that those kids in that high school would never be the same. And I also knew that I wouldn't be the same, because I said to my team afterwards, every one of you on this team working on dignity, working on inclusion, every one of you has had to do hard things in your life. And every one of you has had to take risks. And no one has done anything harder than what she did today. No one. To stand up in front of a complete school of teenagers and bare your heart and ask for change, that's as hard as anything anybody can do, in my view. And I think everyone on my team, all the adults, we were all not, yeah, I agree. And we got to be as tough as her. And that's what it's like to be fully alive, to be that free and that gutsy, to tell your truth and to try to change the world with it. Man, that's what I love being. I love being in the presence of people who show me how to do that.
You've studied religion deeply, but life often brings its own theology. Has your view of God changed after all you've seen and felt? It's a topic people tend to shy away from, but I think it's important for others to hear how powerful it can be. For me, it's been a source of stability through a turbulent time and helped me make sense of it all.
Well, the best answer to that question is probably yours, Tim, that in turbulence, there is sense. In difficult times, there's meaning. People are like, they don't like religion because it's about being mean, or they don't like religion because it's about magic. Hey, I don't believe in magic and mirror, But to me, religion is about finding and discovering the naked intent to love. That's a quote from The Cloud of Unknowing. The naked intent that lies within each of us, the naked desire to be loving, and the naked willingness to love no matter the cost. That's, to me, a kind of a pretty good definition of what God is. The creative source that loves us into being and holds us no matter what. Every one of us has conscious experiences of that. We don't often call those religious, but I think they are. And so I grew up thinking religion was very much about, a particular story, a particular religious tradition. It was a lot about being right and wrong. There's a lot of right and wrong in religion. This is right, that's wrong. This is good, that's bad. This is morally positive, this is morally evil. This is God, this is Satan. Choose right, not wrong, confess, make amends if you make horrible mistakes. I think all that's part of it, but I think what really undergirds all that is the source, the desire, and the destiny, which is love. I think if we can know in the face of the adversity, as you just said, that God didn't protect you from it. Apparently, God doesn't stop adversity. But I do believe, and I have felt and feel confident that God is with us in everything. And that makes it all hold a certain sense in which no matter what, we're going to make it. We're going to be okay. And that's transcendence, I suppose. But you don't need to have a magic wand to believe in that. You just, I think, need to be able to look deeply into your own heart and look deeply into the heart of someone else. And I think most of us can see it pretty clearly.
Your family has lived through public grief, assassinations, illness, and other deep losses. How did those experiences shape your ability to walk alongside families facing disability?
Well, I'd say I hear a lot in the disability world. Like I was talking to a woman the other day who said there's this symptom or a syndrome, I guess is the right word, called autism grief. And she was describing what in her case, mom, goes through when she goes to the pediatrician's office and gets the news that her child has autism. And I've talked to many moms over the generations who have said, you know, when the doctor came back in the delivery room and she said, "Is the baby okay?" And they say, "No, baby's not okay." And they follow up and say, "The baby has Down syndrome, or the baby has some chronic condition that will affect their cognitive capacity." And so there's a moment of grief, you know, and fear and terror. And I guess in some ways as a kid, I felt, you know, not that particular kind of grief, but a certain kind of grief. I certainly saw my parents experience enormous grief, sudden, shocking, inexplicable, public grief. So I think I knew from an early age that learning how to make sense and move through grief was an important life experience, life skill. It sounds so trite, but that's what I guess it is. So I hope when people share with me the stories of their children, or when people with, like, a young man told me the other day with Down syndrome, he's just like, I want to go out on a date, I want to drive a car. I don't want to have Down syndrome. I can't do a lot of things I wish. This is a person telling me his own story, his own grief. I hope what they find in me is someone who presents to them a sense in which I'm with them in that. I can't say I understand it. I mean, nobody understands anybody else's grief. I can't understand yours, Tim. You haven't lived mine, and nor do I want anybody else to. So, but I can be there. I can be present. I can communicate to you that while I'm not maybe going through what you're going through, I am going through it with you. And I think, I know I'm drawn to people who make me feel that way when I'm struggling. And I hope I offer that to people who are struggling, if I, to the best of my ability.
Living with ALS has taught me how much strength is found in adapting again and again. Do you see that same kind of courage in the athletes you serve?
I do. I think, a lot of people will say when something goes wrong, I hope he gets better. Or I hope it improves. Or I hope they fix it. And then there's moments where those are not the right things to say, because it's not going to get better. And it's not going to get fixed. And it's not going to, be resolved, so to speak. And in those moments, the best among us find the muscle that says, even though it's not going to get better, I'm going to get stronger. Even though it's not going to get fixed, I'm going to live the best possible life, even though I'm facing a difficult or an ominous or a painful diagnosis or situation. I won't be defeated by it. And those people, and in those moments, the Special Olympics athletes have a distinct advantage. The people that have had one big success as Olympic athletes, NFL stars, all-American college players, they have such beautiful gifts. The world admires them. It's so mesmerizing, and it's a result of such hard work and determination. But they don't have this gift, usually, I say. Usually they don't have this gift of recognizing that it's not going to work out the way the world wants it to, and I'm going to be strong anyway. I'm going to be beautiful anyway. I'm going to live my life fully anyway. So if you're looking for that, like a role model for that, I'd say you're more likely to find one at a Special Olympics track meet than you are at an Olympic track meet. And you're more likely to find that role model in a person with Down syndrome who's 16 than you are in a person who's an All-American who's 16, who's on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Nothing against the cover of Sports Illustrated. I think it's fantastic. I'm a huge sports fan. But we got to know what we're getting in different places, and what we admire in great Olympic athletes is different than what we can admire in great Special Olympics athletes. And David Stern, the late great commissioner of the NBA, said to me 30 years ago, he said to me, you know what your motto ought to be in Special Olympics? I said, what, Mr. Stern? He said, you ought to just say, we're the best in sports. And I kind of think he's right for this reason.
I agree. Tim, as a father, what's something you hope your kids see in the world 20 years from now that still feels out of reach today?
Well, I hope they see, I'm going to say this is going to sound maybe overly simplistic. I hope they see political leaders who bring out the best in the country. I'm not saying Republican leaders or Democratic leaders or presidents or senators. I'm just hoping they see political leaders who bring out the best in us. What do you try to do as a dad or as a mom? You try to make sure, I think, that your children feel seen as they are, which is not easy, but that's what you're trying to do. And I say the second half of that is we're trying to help our kids see what they can't yet see, like believe in themselves in a way they can't yet see. So I want our country to feel that way. I want a political leader I want to look at them on the television or on my phone or whatever, and I want to feel seen. I don't care whether I'm a Democrat or Republican, whether I'm 60 or 50 or 10. I don't care whether I'm black or white or rich or poor from the heartland or the coastland. I want a political leader who makes us all feel seen and makes us see that we can be even more than we are. Now, that may be big picture, but in the meantime, I hope every school in America has a Special Olympics unified sports team. That's my granular goal, because I think if we raise a generation who grow up going to the high school pep rally and the big 6'4", forward charges into the gym, getting ready for the big basketball game, and the 6'3", 250-pound future first-round draft choice charges into the gym, and the band plays, and then the 4'11" young guy with Down syndrome charges into the gym, and everybody's cheering even louder. I think those kids will know that kid with 4'11" kid is just like that All-American. And we got to build a country where we feel that way, where we see that way, where we hire that way, where we live that way. So it may seem simple, but Tim, when you and I were kids, not every school had a girls' team for sports. And kids are kids' ages, people are, what? Are you serious? There was a high school and only had a boys' basketball team? There was no girls' team? What are you talking about, Dad? Is that possible? Yeah, that happened. And I want their kids to say to them, Dad, Mom, Are you telling me when you went to high school, there was no Special Olympics unified team? How is that possible?
Tim, what is that? That team it's both people who have
People with and without intellectual disabilities. We call it Special Olympics unified sports. So
Yeah.
you could play, Troy. I played unified softball for years.
Yeah.
I was really, really good. No, just kidding. So we create these teams with people of comparable abilities, but people with and without intellectual disabilities. So a school could have 4 or 5 or 6 kids with intellectual challenges and 4 or 5 or 6 kids who don't have intellectual challenges, and they play on a basketball team. And if you're going to Jefferson High and you want to play against Bethune or you want to play against Monroe or whatever, you play in it just like the basketball team plays. And the place goes nuts when you score, just like when the All-American scores. And everybody knows there's a difference between the gifts they have, but there's no difference in the courage. There's no difference in the grit. There's no difference in the joy. There's no difference in the capacity to see that everybody matters. So, the kids start to learn it, and then all of a sudden, it'll be uncool to treat people like crap.
Yeah. I've never even heard of that. And I'm from a smaller town, which I imagine to be harder to implement than it would be in a place that was
We
bigger,
do. We've got them all over the place. You're in like upstate New York, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So now you got a job. You gave me a job to produce a movie. I just gave you a job to start a unified team at your brother's high school.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Special Olympics New York has a great team. If you want, I can connect you with them, and we can get going on that. It's not anywhere near as complicated as it seems. It's a game changer.
How do people roll it out? If the goal, is it a realistic goal? It sounds like it's realistic. In 20 years, it could be everywhere.
Yeah.
If you're comparing it to the, not having women's sports.
Yeah.
So how do people, if there's a listener who's listening right now and says, that's something I want to be a part of, or I wish we could do that, what would people do?
Every Special Olympics state office in the United States has a team dedicated just to this. Starting unified sports programs in American public high school, middle school, and even elementary school sometimes, park rec departments. So there, the way we usually start is we invite young people. So we go to the high school and we say, are there any young people here who would like to start a Special Olympics unified sports team? And we could start with bocce, which is really easy. All you need is a ball and a little, like a ping pong ball size thing, and you can start playing. Or you can start with basketball. Some places do volleyball, others do swimming, soccer, you name it. But usually it starts with having young people who believe in the idea. And sometimes it's just putting something on the Facebook page or the school page and having an announcement. And sometimes it's only 4 or 5 kids that are interested. But once you get 4 or 5 kids, and the kids get it, and an adult comes in and says, this is what's involved. Next week, you got practice. All you need is a volunteer coach, 4 or 5 other kids from the special needs program who are willing to give it a shot, moms and dads, a little bit of transportation support. We got to practice. And once you got to practice, you got the makings of a team. Once you got the makings of a team, you got the makings of a game, and off we go. One of the most powerful change interventions available to American educators today is to create unified sports programs. And it's one of the cheapest and easiest to implement and easiest to allow young people to lead.
Love and Scoopful turned dessert into something bigger. Have you ever had someone tell you they had no idea their ice cream cone was actually changing lives?
Well, if you're referring to Love and Scoopful Ice Cream, which is a company I started with a couple of friends, the goal was to create a consumer brand where people could choose it because they know that a significant percentage of the profits would be going to Special Olympics. And we built that ice cream brand. We had a couple of years. We were in Walmart. Then we changed strategies a little bit because it turns out it's hard to make money in Walmart. No offense to Walmart, but the margins are pretty tight. And now we're doing different variations of that. But I still think, the message was and is, people said, well, why ice cream? I said, because ice cream makes you smile. It's never going to go out of business. It's never going to go out of fashion. It's not going to make you thin, but it's going to make you smile. And, human beings we survive on a lot of stuff, but one of the things we really hunger for is a chance to smile and be happy. And ice cream is a food that brings that to heart. And I think people want to buy things that make a difference in the world if they can, especially nowadays. They don't want to buy things that are bad for their bodies, bad for the environment, bad for their communities. And, so if they can see a product and the product helps people and gives people a shot, gives Special Olympics athletes a shot, helps make the world a little more inclusive, and they can buy that product, I think still most consumers will take as long as the price is good and as long as the quality is fantastic, they'll take that chance. That was the idea. We're still working on making it successful, but we're still at it.
The World Games event is electric, but when the cameras leave, how do we make sure the torch keeps burning in the small town gym or the local school?
That's the most important question we ask ourselves all the time, Tim. We're interested in World Games, big shows, lights, camera, action, only, and I mean only to the extent it helps drive action in communities. Because 99.9% of people with intellectual disabilities will never go to a Special Olympics World Games. They'll be at the end of the street in a small town in upstate New York. Their moms or their dads, brothers and sisters will go to whatever schools are available. Sadly, many of them will never go to school at all where they live, so it makes no difference to them that we have a big party at World Games unless that big party catalyzes action where they live. And so our goal with Games is to bring in government leaders, business leaders, social and cultural leaders, to bring in young activists, parent activists, to bring them there so they can be energized to go back and make it happen in the local community 365. We want to be a 7 days a week, 365 days a year movement, not a once every 2 years movement. And so our hope is, in the United States in particular, to use the energy of a big event like a World Games, which we just had in Italy, or like a USA Games, which we'll have soon next year in Minneapolis, St. Paul. These are big events. They're fantastic. But we're trying to use the energy of those games to bring in coaches, to bring in teachers, to bring in healthcare practitioners, doctors and nurses. Come here so you can go back and change your community. That's the only value. Yes, we want to showcase great sports, but we want to showcase great sports because great sports inspire people to give everybody the chance to be a great sportsman or sportswoman.
I have kind of a similar question here. And Tim, truthfully, it's like, it's almost like a little embarrassing. I didn't know. I mean, I everything you're saying, it's like the first time I've ever heard it. And
right.
I didn't
shame
know.
on us, right?
No, I feel like shame on me. I'm like, it's such a cool thing. It's such a great, everyone has to support it, but I think people don't, like, you don't know what you don't know. Right. And so what can people do that, if it's the Special Olympics or if it's the World Games or whatever it is, I mean, what can people do?
Well, I mean, your generation is a social media generation, so we're trying to build social media capabilities. We've gotten, we're up in the hundreds of thousands and millions of followers when you add it all up, on YouTube and Instagram and Facebook and WhatsApp and all these different applications. So telling the story is a big part of this, and getting young people to tell the story in a way that compels them. Like I'm older than time. Like the way I would tell a story would fit well for, ABC's Wide World of Sports, which like that its peak in 1978 or something, So we need a new generation of storytellers. We need a new generation of activists. We talked about schools here, but we need young people your age, younger, older, who are going to say, hey, look, I'm busy. I got a lot going on in my life, but I can help make this one basketball team, go. And I maybe you're not no good at basketball, but you can still help. You can still raise the $200 or the $300 that we might need for uniforms that the school doesn't have a budget for to get going. So we need people actually to believe again that they can make a difference. That's one of the things that's the worst things about this moment in time. A lot of Americans say they don't believe in the future. They don't believe their contribution matters. Special Olympics is here to say that's not true. That's not true. The future can be better. We've made it better. It's better today than it was 10 years ago. It's a hell of a lot better today than it was 30 or 40 years ago. And we're going to make it a hell of a lot better 10 years from now than it is today for people with intellectual challenges and for all of the rest of us too. But we can't do it if people are resigned to failure. We have to get people to believe.
I was literally going to say to you, it's a perfect kind of segue. I was going to say, like, does it move the needle if I tune in and watch that? Does it move the needle if I'm a regular person that says, hey, this sounds cool, but I'm not, I got too much going on, or I don't want to put myself out there. Just a regular person who's listening to this that doesn't want to lead the charge, but they want to support it.
Yeah.
I mean, does it make a difference?
Yeah. Click on YouTube. Go to the Special Olympics YouTube channels. You know, when you're scrolling, you know, tonight or this afternoon or on the bus or wherever you scroll, spend 10 minutes on the Special Olympics YouTube channel. Forward the thing. Tell the story. The story's out there. We just got to get people to help us tell it. And, you know, you'll see. So we all know clicks are money. Not literally for us, but eyeballs change the direction of things. You know, a lot of people are looking for fun stuff to scroll. I get it. Snark to scroll. Ooh, that's cool. Bad news to scroll. That's exciting for some reason to most of us. But hey, I got another story for you to scroll. Scroll the power of the human spirit. Share that with your kids, with your spouse, with your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your parents. Tell them that story. You know, they need to pick me up too. So let's tell those stories too. And you don't have any time to do anything. That's something you can do that makes a difference.
You've done a lot of interviews. What's a question you wish someone would finally ask you, and how would you answer it?
I guess I wish someone would ask me, you know what most people don't ask, Tim, is what do you think is fun? Because fun always feels trivial, not important. I wish someone would ask me, can fun be important? And here's my answer. Actually, yes. You don't have to do something fun and then do something important later. And you don't have to do something important that's never going to be fun and wait to have to, do fun later. I think the best things in life are both fun and important because they elevate your soul and they change the world. And those are the two things I'm most interested in. So when I get to go to Special Olympics events, the most common reaction I have was I had a good time. I had fun. And most people would say, well, that must not be important. I said, yes, it was. Yes, it was. So I'm not sure that's the best question I wish I'd always been asked, but I do feel like a lot of times in life we split ourselves into the serious things which are important and the not serious things which are fun. I think that's a mistake. And I think when we put those two things together and they can come together, then we got the sweet spot of what makes a difference. And I maybe wish I could give more examples about that and solicit from people more examples of how fun and important fit together in their lives. But that's a hell of a good question, by the way.
That was a good one. I was just thinking we got to ask that more often.
Yeah, you should ask that more often. I'd love to hear the answer. That's a book in and of itself. What's the one question you wish you'd been asked?
At the end of each podcast, I try to ask our guests to brag about their family because that's truly what is most important. So brag away.
I mean, I have 5 kids. How much time do we have? I have 5 kids, 2 children-in-law, 4 and 2/3 grandchildren, a spectacular wife, a spectacular 3 brothers and a sister, 100 cousins and second cousins. Here's what I really love about my family. They love each other. We fight like hell and we make all kinds of dumbass moves. And right now it's kind of hard in many respects. But when the most people in my family get together, they're the happiest they ever are. And that goes for 20-year-olds and teenagers and 40-year-olds and 70-year-olds. We get together and everybody's like, you look around the room and everybody's laughing and smiling. And if you can, if anybody listening to this has that blessing in their life, they know what a privilege it is. And I feel that that's my story. My daughter, now I can go into the specifics. My daughter has 2 kids. She's pregnant. She's a therapist. Her husband's a rock star. She's I'm not going to say the best mother, but close to the best mother I've ever seen of her little kids. Her little kids are rock stars. My next son is a lawyer. He's working in tech. He's traveling. He's kicking rear ends and taking names all over the country. His wife is a spectacular artist and gardener. Their 2 kids are in an outdoor school. They climb trees like they were walking on the sidewalk. They're unbelievable. My next son is working in rehab, supporting young people, especially young men who are struggling. He goes to the gym 3 hours a day. He's almost as tough as Tim Green in his prime. And although we're not going to compare, I know that's not good. My next daughter is fantastic, lives in LA, works for the bank, is a media specialist, makes films, has worked on the border, speaks fluent Spanish, is rock star, healthy right now. My youngest daughter's an artist. She lives in Brooklyn. She takes every chance in the world. She danced with the Alvin Ailey School. She performs, she curates, she gathers artists into village events. My wife is right now working with Afghan women who are resettling here and who are refugees and immigrants and legally here and looking for help and hope, and who's there to do it? My wife. I could go on. My sister, my brothers. It just. I'm sorry to say I have the greatest family in the world.
Now on to our final word segment, where we ask our guests a few rapid-fire questions. What was the happiest moment in your life?
Getting married.
What is the biggest adversity you've faced?
Murder in my family.
What are you most excited about?
A bursting forth of a new spiritual energy in the country.
What advice would you give your high school self?
It's going to be okay.
Next one is, what book recommendations do you have for us or for the listeners?
Final season. No, just kidding. I just read a beautiful book, The Man the Moment Belongs by Jason Wilson, about men. It's not just for men, but it's about men no longer being emotionally incarcerated. And I think it's a really important lesson for the future.
The name of our podcast is Nothing Left Unsaid. Do you have anything you want to say?
I'm grateful. Very, very grateful. Grateful for the time, grateful for the example, grateful for the conversation. I'm very grateful to have lived at a time when Pope Francis lived, because I wish I'd lived when Lincoln lived, and I'd wish I'd been younger when Dr. King was teaching, but I was old enough to watch Pope Francis teach, and I'm grateful to live when Tim Green is teaching too.
And then before we let you go here, I ask everybody at the end of every podcast, now that you kind of know us, you kind of know what we're doing here, what the story is, who's somebody or a couple people that you know personally that you think we should try to get on the podcast?
Well, I get Loretta, who I talked about, Claiborne. I'd get some great Special Olympics athletes like Loretta Claiborne, or Frank Stevens, who's led a lot of the R-word work for us, and he's from Virginia. I would get, I interviewed Mike Adams. There's so many great football players who have, through coaching and through the experience of playing a sport, found a deeper energy. The number of athletes who lead with their faith, I think, is really something. It's an untold story in the United States, and the power of faith to emerge through the adversity and triumph and challenge of sport, but also the power of sport to shape and strengthen a person's faith, I think, is a fantastic story. I want to get Amanda Gorman. She's the poet, young poet, and a person of faith and a person of great linguistic gifts. Tim, you're a writer. There's so many beautiful writers in America who don't get, bestseller status. I'd love to hear you talk to them and talk about words and how to use words to shape experience. our country needs a new story. The story we're telling ourselves about who we are is corrosive and contemptuous and destructive. We need a new story, and you're a storyteller. Get some storytellers on here and help us see ourselves in a new plot. Those are my ideas.
Tim, thank you. You've spent your life showing that leadership isn't about being the loudest. It's about lifting others up. And in a world so quick to tear people down, your work is a reminder that we can still choose dignity. Thanks for being here. Thanks for using your platform for good. And thanks for all you do. It truly means a lot.
Thank you, Tim. And thank you for all that and for keeping the faith.
Thanks, Tim. It was awesome. Really, I learned so much, so I feel a little embarrassed about it, but I'm going to follow up with you after.
Awesome. I look forward to it.
Today's episode is brought to you by the ALS Investment Fund, a specialized biotech venture capital investment firm focused on neurodegenerative diseases, particularly ALS. They manage a large and diversified worldwide portfolio of ALS-related companies, collaborating with a global network of scientists, clinicians, foundations, and patient advocates to accelerate therapeutic development, investing for a world without ALS. Discover more about their mission and impact at alsinvestmentfund.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, consider supporting the podcast for free by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform, leaving a review, and sharing it with your friends. Your support means the world to us. This episode of Nothing Left Unsaid is brought to you by 11 Labs. Their groundbreaking technology makes a huge difference, and we're grateful for their support. To learn more, visit 11labs.io. A substantial portion of our sponsorship proceeds go to tackleals.com, funding cutting-edge ALS research. If you'd like to join the fight and contribute, visit tackleals.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on Nothing Left Unsaid.